Folks, come with us to Entrepreneurland. I'll tell you what, I am so thrilled to be with this author. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. My son just met him again, and he
What
was
a
so
great kid.
well, you were so gracious, and he's still talking about you, but listen, man, you got a heart. You got a heart for students, a heart for now children, a heart for adults. Steve, tell us about Entrepreneurland. Once upon a time.
So, as you may or may not know, my second book was called Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland, but that was for adults.
Yes.
And it's got some adult themes because it starts with the story of Stone Soup with Joe Polish in it. So clearly it's going to be a little risque, right? But the reality is that it was an appropriate story given that a lot of entrepreneurs start with rocks and then
Yeah,
expect to make a business out of all the people they meet, like you and me, right?
that's right.
And so it was beautiful. We were there last week, I think it was,
Yeah, we were in Arizona.
in Scottsdale, right? And man, it's amazing when things like this happen. So this obviously is a copy of the book because I can see it right
Beautiful.
up here. Um,
Spanish and English.
yeah, is this one? Oh, this is the Spanish version. Oh boy,
No,
of
but I love
course.
it.
You know what? I was studying to be a deacon in our diocese, and this was years ago, about 15 years ago, and I was told not to go from somebody up above. Just like
Okay.
you did that too, didn't
I
you?
did. I did for 12 years.
There you go. Well,
Yeah,
I got my message sooner.
yeah, you did.
And the reality was that my church is entrepreneurship.
Whoa, that's deep. That's deep.
We're the creators, right?
That's deep.
As entrepreneurs, we make the impossible possible.
Mm,
So, one of my favorite mantras is, wouldn't it be cool if?
I like that.
And the reality is, that's what we do every day. Wouldn't it be cool if, boom, right? And then we just make that happen. So I'll digress. I'll give you stories about how we're able to use our entrepreneurial brains to change
Do
the
it.
world.
Do it. I'm going to get you on this.
We've got a 400-acre farm down in Georgia, a tree farm, which is about to turn into a nursery as well. We've got cows, chickens, sheep, and so on. And I bought the Meta glasses, the second version of the Meta glasses. I had the first version, but they didn't have this capability. And it was to be able to live translate. So I just had a whole bunch of people come up from Mexico, and some of them have been here and others are brand new. And I don't get a chance for them to fully understand that we're trying to save farmers to help them create a sustainable farm through the tree growing methodologies that we teach at Kary Farms. So I look at these glasses and I'm able to have a real conversation with a new amigo on the farm, telling him exactly the story of the farm. But here's where it gets even more interesting. One of the people on my executive team here in New York, her husband went blind.
Oh,
And he can barely see anything. She was mocking him for trying to paint a room and missing a bunch of spots and so on. So while I'm putting on these Meta glasses, suddenly I see, would you like to use your Meta glasses for Be My Eyes? I'm like, what? What's Be My Eyes? And suddenly I'm pulled into this realm of blind people who live volunteers, which include me, by the way, will jump on their phones and they have their Meta glasses on or their phone on, but the Meta glasses allows them to hands-free look at themselves in the mirror. Do I have a red sweater on or a brown sweater
no
on?
way.
Can I do this? Can I do that? Yeah, it's
So you're like crowdsourcing vision.
and it's beautiful. And if you don't answer the call, there's 8.5 million of us that are doing this. And I said, man, wouldn't it be cool if, and then we just start with other things. Like I could teach people to grow the trees. I create sessions for people to be able to grow the trees that we're growing. And I could actually be with the farmer and say, okay, you see this? This is what's going on over here and so on. So we take what we see. It's like the Reese's peanut butter cups, right?
Yeah.
And what happens with the Reese's peanut butter cups? It was a guy with peanut butter and a guy in the chocolate section of the factory crashed into each other and made a big old mess. And boom, Reese's peanut butter cups were born, right?
Listen, everything about you, I think of the word magic. And
Mm.
what I mean by that is I'm on Instagram the other day and I see you freeing a deer
Oh Lord, yeah.
that's hopping over your fence. I mean,
Yeah.
you're on this farm, you're building a what did you build? The health stream lives what was that,
The
Airstream?
Ohm stream, OMSTREAM, like an Airstream, but now this is the Ohm stream.
So what I'm saying, folks, is like you're talking to one of the I think the most brilliant minds that I've met. He's everywhere. He's doing this tree thing. He's the UN rep for the entrepreneur in general. He's mentoring students all over the world. You're building AI. Like, where did this all come from?
I was one of five children, right? I was the middle child, and I guess the third child kind of gets forgotten a little bit. So I
A little
created
bit.
my own world. And it was funny. I was talking to one of my aunts who's in her 90s not too long ago, and she says, "We didn't know where you were going, but we knew you were going somewhere." And I don't know if that meant I was going to prison or if I was going to be in business. But it started as a kid because I used to have businesses. My first business was, selling manure to my neighbors because it gave me the ability to talk to them and engage with them. And business is,
Mm,
really easy for me to talk about.
right.
And I feel really
Confidence.
connected,
Yeah.
confident, connected. I just think it's probably the easiest thing in the world for me. But you know how we think that everybody's like us sometimes?
Yeah.
I didn't realize how few entrepreneurs were out there. And so you and I are sitting in Scottsdale, and suddenly they made the claim.
Mm,
Ann Sullivan said, "I believe entrepreneurs get their first inspiration, business, whatever, at 8 years old." And
wow.
like more than half the room raised their hands. And what's ironic is I look at the back of my book and it says for entrepreneurs 8+.
8+. I love it.
And I hired a child psychologist to help me with the book because we do that sort of stuff, right?
Right.
And so she was giving me perspective on one of the stories. Um, there's a it's the gift of leadership, and it's about a child who is tasked with being the leader of their kickball team.
Okay.
And where I look at leadership, it goes from manipulation as we're young and
Sure.
eager to motivation, where it's like, how can you make something happen to me?
Right.
And then ultimately to inspiration. If we
Mm,
can evolve to inspiration, and in this child's journey in the story, he unfortunately succumbs to being a bully at one point because his brother, who's on the lacrosse team, says, "This is the way you do it."
mm,
And he fails miserably. And we've all had those responses, right? I mean, we've had really, right? People are allergic to being told what to do. They want to be inspired. They want to have something bigger than them to be working towards. So in this story, he evolves to inspiration and he learns. And so it was funny. I was sitting next to a guy who's got his doctorate in psychiatry, and he read that chapter just while he was sitting when I was at the Genius Network event.
okay.
And he says, "I just read that story about, leadership. That's brilliant. I'm going to bring it to my daughter who's 29 years old." I'm like, "Well, I have one for adults too." No, he goes, "No, I like this reading level. It's really
Mm,
good." But what the child psychologist told me in mentoring me for this book was, you need to make the kids interaction with people who are older being people who are 14 and 15. You can't make it
oh, wow.
way too far away because that's who they look up to, right?
Oh, yeah. You have a teenager walk into a room with elementary kids, they're an automatic hero. 100%.
Exactly. Right? Just like Keegan, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
Keegan gets a
Oh, yeah.
lot of that.
Oh,
He's a
yeah,
cool
absolutely.
kid. He's tall. He's handsome. And he walks in. He's got that curly hair.
Yes.
And he's just got a great personality. But kids would be very attracted to that.
Sure. Absolutely. So you gotta take our viewers, though. A lot of our viewers have ideas, but they don't act on them.
Yeah.
And call it whatever, call it imposter syndrome, call it fear. How did you move from going of the idea guy, giving manure as a young kid to
selling manure.
selling them. Yeah. How did you go from like the bridge? Because I'm the same way, man. I got ideas and I'm like, here's the idea in the morning. We're selling it in the afternoon. But
Yeah.
that's a different thing. Like, is it just a gift, or can anybody on this call who has an idea make the shift?
Well, I think you hit it first when I corrected you and I said sell something. Nothing happens till something
Ah,
gets sold. Money for a business is food, it's air,
mm,
it's energy. So unless you can actually ideate about, is there a market for this? Well, why would we? Are we a not for profit? No, we're entrepreneurs. And part of what we need is money to be able to pay for other people, pay for goods and services, and
wow,
so on, because nobody will be super happy as impoverished in their entrepreneurial ventures, because that'll only last so long, right?
that's right. So there was this thought this morning at 6 a.m. when I was working out with my buddy. And Chet and I were chatting, and we said, you know what? Why do so many people have no problem selling products, but then when they become an entrepreneur, they're scared to sell themselves?
Yeah, I think it's
You know what
it's
I'm
lack
saying?
of confidence, it's lack of confidence, it's lack of clarity,
Okay.
and they don't value their own experiences. The
Or
world,
in your book, you got to tell that story where the guy gets ripped off by his friend, embarrassed, ashamed, goes back into his shell.
yeah. So yeah, in the book, there's a story about a guy. It's back in the 1800s, and they trade. At that time, it was gold coins and such. And he left his family business, which were shepherds,
Mm,
and the shepherds. He told his dad, "I want to start a watch shop in the town." And his dad said, "We've been shepherds for many generations. Why would you do that?" So he didn't even have support from his family, which happens all the time. And he's like, why would you do that? And so he goes into business. He gets a little bit of success. People start buying these fine watch pieces from him. And then he hires his best friend to
mm,
come and work the front of the store. And he puts the watches together and does this whole thing. And what ends up happening is he's really struggling and he doesn't understand the finance part of it and so on, but he witnesses his friend slipping a gold piece or two into his pocket as he hands the watch over to a customer.
mm.
And when he ends up doing that, his friend, I mean, this is his best friend, it's the person, his confidant. He says, "Oh my gosh, this is the most terrible thing that's ever going to happen." He does end up getting rid of him. By the way, this is a story about me, so I'll share that with you. And so then he goes through all this turmoil and tries to figure it all out. And
Mm.
he meets somebody that belongs that runs a group called the Shopkeepers Association. And for me, that's EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization,
Gotcha.
where I have a group of fellow entrepreneurs in non-competing businesses typically, and we get to communicate with each other because there's almost nobody we can be real with
Totally.
when we're as entrepreneurs, and that's the biggest challenge. So as the story goes, there's a surprise ending to where Eric goes with his watch pieces, and I want you to read that story because that's really, really a fun little twist to it. The other thing I love about telling fables is my first book was Pitchology, the Art and Science of Raising Capital for Entrepreneurs. It's great if you're raising capital.
Mm.
It's like a technology book or a workbook on, okay, you can do
So
this.
helpful. Oh my gosh.
But I bet you the retention is pretty minimal when you don't even want to do a SPAC, a special acquisition company, right? A special purpose acquisition company, or whatever, crowdfunding or so. That's not really relevant. But when I tell you a story, it sticks,
Absolutely.
right? It sticks 90+%. So to answer the question, to finalize the answer to your question about people not being able to go into business, there's solopreneurs
Mm.
and then there's entrepreneurs, right? The solopreneurs are the ones who are self-employed. So do they have a business? No, they have a profession. They are locked into their businesses. And as we all know, or at least you and I do, there's a Bible, we'll call it, of sorts, or at least a lot of good information in a book called The E-Myth Revisited.
Oh
And
yeah,
the
Mike
E-Myth
Gerber.
Revisited,
Yeah.
Michael Gerber, right? And what does Michael talk about?
He says,
Working.
don't work in the business, work on the business.
Yes. And when you're working on your business, what do you need to do? You need to find whose.
Mm.
So Who Hunter is a story in the
Oh,
book.
it's so
Well,
good.
and so Who Hunter is going to be a whole book. And Who Hunter is a book that is a story about an owl and a wolf who have a conversation and get to fix that wolf's problem right then and there. It's unbelievable that people who are, I'm seeing all these are lines for this show, for this podcast. It's great.
Oh,
I love that.
listen, I got to tell you really quick about Destiny. She's one of my Cedarville students.
Ah,
She is amazing. She tuned in to watch you, and she's a budding entrepreneur who just published her first book of poems on Amazon last week. So
beautiful.
you're getting people who are brand spanking new all the way to seasoned entrepreneurs. But keep
Well, that's
going.
what I want. At 8 years old, that's what we want.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's when you start to take your risks. You pay your tuition. That's when you lose money on something.
Oh yeah,
You learn your lesson. And I saw somebody had posted something about age. And it's so funny. I was in prison a couple weeks ago teaching entrepreneurship. Yeah, down in Houston. And it was funny because my section that I was talking about was who wants to be an entrepreneur? And I said, tell me what goes on between your ears to think that you can't be an entrepreneur when you get out. I don't know if you do it from inside here, but tell me. And it was, they're unemployable because they're felons and therefore can't get the capital to start their business. It was so funny. I think you know Mark Young. Mark looks out at the group and he goes, have you seen the employee pool lately? There's a lot of people that aren't willing to work. And if you're willing to work, there's a lot of work for you.
Yeah. And there's a lot of we won't get into it, but there's a lot of corporate fraud out there, government fraud. And so
the trust is terrible. The trust levels are so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying nobody's beyond redemption, whether you got stolen from, like your story, where what I love about your story so much is that there is an embarrassment. Like I resonated. Oh my gosh. I read that and I thought there is this shame that it's like these lessons that if an entrepreneur can't go past the lesson, they stay stuck. And I feel like maybe a lot of success as an entrepreneur is that you don't give up.
Oh,
what do you think?
Right. It's tenacity, it's persistence. So there's a lot in what you just said. So there's a thing called HALTs: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed. You ever hear of that?
I heard about that.
That's the end of the night, right? When you start getting bugged by everything.
Okay.
And as an entrepreneur, we have to just take our brains, take them out and put them on the side and say, okay, you need rest because we need to sleep.
Absolutely. But
the reality is all of these lessons are steps up and it'll never happen again. And you said, some people get stolen from, or some people, or I did. The reality is, I think most entrepreneurs, every entrepreneur is getting stolen from, but you just don't know how. And the reality is that, and it isn't limited by age. I totally agree, Tanisha. That's a very good point. You are not limited by age because there's so many people that start in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
There are people who start like me at 6 years old. I don't know about 4 years old, but I do actually know 4 years old. That was my son.
Oh my God.
But the reality is that this is a way of life. And when you get that taste of entrepreneurship, that freedom, that's where it all starts to happen. You start to realize that you can make your dreams come true, but you need to find the right who's to be on your team. It first starts with you, and then you start finding the opportunities based upon what sells, right? What does the market want? Because we create whatever we want, But if nobody else is interested in, pickles with peanut butter or whatever,
Sure.
right? Why would you actually make that? Because the customer votes with their dollars.
Yeah. What does our mentor say? Dan Sullivan, check writers, right?
Exactly. Check writers. Exactly.
That's good.
So yeah, no, it's good. And so being able to inspire children to be able to do good things with their businesses, because we can, highest level of leadership is inspiration. And if we can create a business that solves a problem, like Be My Eyes, I know that's not a business, but Be My Eyes is an app that allows you to help blind people. I'm not getting paid for that. I can't wait for my calls to come in.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Wow. But listen, just name a few things. I mean, I know you got the tree thing.
Yeah.
Name your stuff.
So I got a tree farm in Georgia. We are in the process of building a very large nursery that's going to provide fresh food for the surrounding communities, including Atlanta. We've got fresh, we have chicken eggs and chicken meat. Oh man, they're so fun to do. Am I the only one that gets excited about stuff like this? So my daughter just got engaged, and we're talking to her and her fiance about what they want for their wedding, and they want to have it at the farm in the fall of 2027. So I said, "What do you want?" He goes, "Well, I love mutton, sheep or lamb or so." And my farm manager says, "Well, that's going to take a lot of fencing." And then he says, "Well, I heard there's some virtual fences. You put collars on the sheep." And I said, "Man, if we could put collars on the sheep, they could actually trim between these thousands of trees that we have."
Oh my.
And we just got our first 5 sheep.
No way.
Yeah.
But
and
see,
now they're in there.
But that's crazy, because again, you have an idea and then you activate the idea. I think there's something there, because a lot of people have a lot of ideas and they're just talking. You, my friend, said, "You know what? The guy wants sheep. We need the grass trimmed." Problem solving.
Yep. Yeah.
Were you afraid? Were you afraid to get the sheep?
No.
What happens then if the sheep get sick? Tell the entrepreneur who's listening that, like, you can't control the sheep. There's going to be something that happens. That
Coyotes come and kill them. Coyotes come, and these sheep are stuck inside this geogrid with this GPS and so on, and the coyotes kill them. So I'm getting an Anatolian Shepherd. So I have the word out on the street for that, which is a big old dog that likes to kill things and chase them. And then I heard that 2 llamas, because male and female, they like to be together. They actually act like the sheep, and they will protect the sheep. So it's just like a whole new.
This is crazy. This is crazy.
So you asked about businesses, right? So I've got businesses. I've got 8 businesses in New York. I own an insurance company also, because I was paying too much in insurance premiums. So I figured out a way to do that. I have a company in the Philippines that employs a few dozen people to back everything up. But it starts in baby steps. You have to first see where the need is. Wow. And you have to test it. So there's a great book, which is probably behind me somewhere, called Exponential Organizations.
Oh yeah, Salim and Peter.
Yeah, and Peter just did a book with him too. Yeah. And Exponential Organizations talks about how we as entrepreneurs, once you have a business, hopefully your business has immunity to your crazy. How many times you come home from a conference, a seminar, a meeting, and you go, "I got the greatest idea in the whole wide world," and you pull everybody off.
Wow.
So we have a saying, which is focus precedes success. And I have a phrase which I call, "I'm going in a luge." And the luge for me is that sled that goes 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? Do you think you'd answer your cell phone or send out a text during the luge? I don't think so. You're going to be whole 100%. In there, 100% in it. And then I become obsessive. And then I have to walk away from it, and then I come back to it, and I walk away from it, I come back to it. I'll whiteboard incessantly about things. And that's how it starts to happen for me. And then go ahead.
So this llama thing is actually fueling your tank, like the sheep, the llama.
Yeah.
It's just
Oh,
you up.
yeah. And then I get my who's together. So I had a who call yesterday, and it was my farm manager, it was a project manager, and a grant writer who said, I may be able to get you money for the stuff that you're doing at the farm. And, I have never gotten a nickel from the government for the farm. But I'm like, okay, well, we'll put it to good use. We'll do some really great things with the new greenhouses that we're going to present and everything. So it's like just being able to
Wow.
exponentially think. And in Salim's book, what ends up happening is he talks about in exponential thinking,
Mm,
we don't want to ruin our businesses, and you need to have an R&D team, a research and development team. And the reality is, if you have no resources,
mm.
you can just have a chat GPT. You can have your own GPT for all your crazy ideas.
Wow.
Talk to it on your train ride or your car ride or your bike ride and say, listen, and I named mine Jarvis. And I'm like, so Jarvis, how you doing? He goes, good, Steve-O. How you doing? I'm doing great. So I want to bring up our GPT on this topic. Oh, yeah, here it is. Let's talk.
Wow.
And then we start to ideate around, okay, now do me a favor and make a little plan, and then who the different people are that could potentially help me with it. And boom, I've got that put together. So I do that. And it's just the way my brain works. So, Melissa talks about, she loves that I started insurance. Yes.
Yeah. Melissa, exactly. Yeah.
Starting an insurance company because I was paying too much. Well, I had to get past, I think it was $2 or $3 million in premium before I could do that. And then now it goes to a company and it builds reserves, and I'm able to write off the whole premium, but only 10% of what I've paid is actually shown as income in the insurance company. It's fascinating how it all works. And then I have reinsurance to do the other things. And what I often tell entrepreneurs is part of the climbing of the ladder of success is taking expenses and turning them into assets. So easiest one, what's the easiest one? Rent, right? You turn rent and you buy a building. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. And so I created a Filipino company because I was leasing people from a company to do all my back office work. And somebody made this one line. You have those one words or one lines that people say to you. They said, the challenge you have by leasing these people through this organization is you can't create your culture
They're turnover
with these people. Well, they'll turn over, but they don't understand our values, which is the most important thing in a business, which is, what do you stand for? How do you lead people? How do you treat people?
Sure.
Nobody works for me. They work with me.
Wow.
And so that's about to become reality, by the way.
I love this.
And the reality is,
yeah.
The reality is my company is going ESOP, which is employee owned. So I am going to contribute my company to a trust, and then my team is going to see the benefits of the work they're doing in a very meaningful way. And many millionaires have been built that way exactly. And it has certain tax advantages, certain opportunities, and it's certain stickiness to your business. So I strongly recommend people look at giving their businesses to the people that help them build it, because they deserve it.
Wow. Listen, I first read your book, Pitchology, and can you see my screen?
I can, yeah.
You see all the different versions you have?
I do, yeah.
So I first read Pitchology, Strategic Coach passed it out, and I said, oh my gosh, this guy knows so much. It was mind-blowing. It really was. I said, this guy knows more about entrepreneur than I ever could. But then all of a sudden you come up with this fantastic book, Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneurland, but it's for adults. Lots of adults love it. It leans itself towards story. You did one in Spanish too, but then you said, I'm going to take it into kids. Let's land the plane with this. What's next? What's next, Steve?
The next book is Who Hunter. The next book is Who Hunter, because Who Hunter is all about finding the right who's in your life in order for you to be able to follow your dreams in such a meaningful way.
I love that.
It's really a big deal. And so I'm actually creating in the IP world, the first IP loan. Like you could actually get a value to your IP and then take a loan against it. People don't do that,
Nice.
and we're ideating constantly.
Yeah.
And so that's the next book. And then as my ESOP has evolved, I'm likely going to do a book on ESOPs, because apparently there's 4 different varieties of ESOPs and nobody talks to one another, and everybody wants to act like they're the only ones on earth. And my goal is to be a hero to entrepreneurs, to help them scale and grow, especially those who are having an impact on the world, on people, and the planet.
I love it. Well, listen, we're out of time, but I will tell you what, Destiny stuck around for the whole thing, and she said, can your values in a business become your IP? I think I know the answer, Steve, but what would you say? Could your core values become part of your IP? What do you think?
It's your largest asset.
Oh, yeah.
And the reality is the monetization or the value that you're creating is, my happy chickens lay more eggs. That's the truth.
Wow.
And that's the reality. We had a rooster in there. We had 2 roosters that were being bullies, and suddenly egg production dropped.
Oh my gosh.
So monetization through values as an IP asset might be a stretch unless you've got something totally interesting, different. I mean, I did trademark the words Entrepreneurland and Pitchology,
Sure.
but your values could turn into that. But they are happy chickens. That's what I think about, is like when I see those chickens laying, dozens of eggs, and now I realize those are golden eggs because the price of eggs have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Everything can be IP. I don't know about your values, but there's a lot of IP in a lot of businesses, and people can't seem to get their minds over it. But it's a good thing, good thing to focus on.
I love it. Steve, it's always a pleasure. I know I'll see you again here in March or April. Folks, get the book. His fantastic website is pitchology.ai, pitchology.ai. And Steve, thanks for all the value you gave to us today.
Yeah, and there's a surprise in the back of the book. You get to meet my clone, if you should so choose. So stay tuned. You'll be talking to me directly, and I won't even be there.
I love it. All right, folks, get your copy today. Get one for your kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews. It's fantastic. All right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kary. Appreciate you.
Okay.